Hey guys, today we're going to be doing a stat breakdown of all heroes that can be classified as ranged auto attackers or the ranged carry. You're going to see some heroes in here that maybe you wouldn't consider as a ranged carry, and that's due to some reworks, particularly like Zagara. But we're going to go into all of their base stat values. And the reason why I'm only using their base values is because over the course of the game, you can expect that every hero's stats are going to increase by about 4% per level. And that's going to have extra value with all kinds of stacking quests like frequent flyer for Falstad. It adds a percentage value to his auto attacks. And so over the course of the game, that's going to get even stronger. And it's hard to map that out. Without going in and trying every hero at every level of the game. And so I'm only using the base values, but keep in mind that anyone that has a stacking quest is going to get even more value throughout the game. So let's start first with base health. So you can expect the average health of a range auto attacker to be somewhere in between that 1400 to 1500 range. And that's why heroes like Tychus really stick out because he's got a huge health pool, and that's for good reason because he's got to be up in the front line burning tanks. And Sergeant Hammer, in comparison, sits very far back. She's got a huge range, yet she has a pretty sturdy health pool. So um, on the other end, you've got Tracer and Phoenix, who've got pretty low health pools. Tassadar is very, very squishy, and when you think about comparing Tracer to Tassadar, Tracer does have her recall, whereas Tassadar doesn't have anything to escape without Force Wall maybe, but unless he gets his invisibility at 13, he's pretty squishy and pretty gankable. Phoenix, gets some compensation with that shield, and so there's the trade-off there. And of course, he also has his warp, which allows him to escape with extra mobility. And he has a handful of movement speed talents as well. And so the trade-off with low health gives him, the trade-off with more movement speed and escape. Same thing here with Falstad, very squishy. And again, when you compare that to like Sylvanas, who also has an escape, she's got a pretty sturdy health pool. Um, so keep that in mind. Cassia, she's got pretty good health and also has armor. Greymane also has armor because and these two, which we'll get into in a minute, have low attack ranges. Obviously, he's when he's in melee form, and then Cassia has one of the lowest base auto attack ranges. But because she has to be a little bit closer, she gets rewarded with a little bit more effective health. Raynor has um, sort of on the lower end of health. However, he gets that balance with his adrenaline rush healing and many cooldown talents for that. And then in addition, he can get a level 4 talent, Behemoth Armor, which gives him a flat 200 health boost, and that will increase through stacking throughout the game, and so that he can get really, really healthy throughout the game. And so if you feel like you need that, that can be a very viable level 4 talent. Um, so now moving on to attack range. The shortest attack range, as mentioned, is Cassia, and you can expect the average to be about 5.5. Um, so Cassia has a very short range. However, she can get booped up to 5.5 and beyond the average at level 13 if she goes Gloves of Alacrity. Tychus also has a short auto attack range, but he can get his bump up to the average level at level 1 if he takes Press the Advantage. I think this is a very underrated talent, and a lot of analysts for CCL have mentioned that they wish that the players would go into this talent more than the grenade talent at 1. Because it allows Tychus to be a little bit more effective. However, if you think like you need that extra long range interrupt with the grenade, then you can go with that. Um, so moving on, Hanzo has a pretty high base attack range, um, and in fact one of the highest. So him and Raynor, and obviously Sergeant Hammer when she's in siege mode, and Zagara have higher than average basic attack range. And so if you need to outrange tanks, um, and you need that, like they Raynor doesn't have a whole lot of mobility, but he can spec into it through some talents through Inspire. If you need to, stay away from ETCs or Garroshes or um, even uh, maybe even what's his name? Oh, Mal'Ganis. Keep them at bay. Maybe Raynor or Hanzo or Zagara can be the way to go, or Sergeant Hammer. Whereas Cassia is going to be a little bit more susceptible to those, aggressive frontline tanks. Um, Through range upgrades at various levels for each hero, you can see how they get even farther. So Hanzo has this 9.5 range increase, ignore all distractions at level 4. And that the way that talent works is when he kills a minion, his next auto or for the next couple seconds, his auto attack range is increased by 3. Um, that's an okay talent if you're fighting near minion waves a lot. Maybe Braxis, but generally, if you don't take uh, the Q talent at 4 for wave clear or the Merc talent at 4 for the W, you're kind of gimping his kit a little bit, and you don't really need this talent considering that he's already above average in terms of attack range. So there may be some niche instances, but generally you don't really need that. Hammer can go up to range 14 with graduating range. However, with Hover Siege being buffed recently to 50% movement speed instead of 40, I think it was, basically having 11 range, which is twice the average of all auto attackers, and then also being able to move it in Hover Siege, you don't really need that 14 range. Basically, you always have 11 and you're able to move it around with Hover Siege. So graduating range isn't as important. Um, the level 13 Remorseless talent for Sylvanas gives her a little bit extra range, and I notice a lot of pros are going this because CCL and Heroes Lounge tanks are so good at punishing ranged auto attackers that and you don't always get the value of the double reset on Haunting Wave. That going Remorseless makes her a little bit makes you able to play a little bit more safer and put out a little bit more consistent damage. Um, it's also worth noting that Vala with Farflight Quiver at 20 goes beyond the average at baseline, and then when she's got Max Hatred, almost becomes Sergeant Hammer. She can outrange forts with Farflight Quiver. It's pretty nasty. And then Zagara with Jagged Barbs, which I think is a level 16 talent, when she's on creep, she gets 7.7 range, which is pretty nasty. And Zul'jin, when he completes his quest, gets extra range, and then can get even more if he completes the Headhunter quest, the talent at level 1, which requires him to kill every enemy on the team. So again, more opportunities to outrange tanks if you need them. I went Nexus Frenzy the other day with Falstad because I needed to not get ganked, and it was like one of the few times that it worked out instead of going like the Gust upgrade or Epic Mount. So Lunara does have some upgrades through Starwood Spear. I think that's a level 16 talent, but there are generally some better options at that tier. All right. Now let's get into the auto attack damage. So first, let's get into the ones that have really small, weak auto attacks. So Tassadar, Tracer, and Tychus. Those are that low because they have a fast attack speed. So Tracer does 2 damage per auto attack. Her full clip is 10 bullets. So essentially, she does 20 auto attack damage. If she takes the upgrade of Locked and Loaded at level 7, that goes up to 30. So, and then we'll get into how that interacts with attack speed. So, ignoring Tassadar, Tracer, and Tychus for just a second, we'll go look at the others. So, the average attack speed is attack damage is somewhere in the 100 to 110 range, with some big exceptions. With Hanzo having one of the just flat out strongest base attack of all of them, and this is traded off by having a slow attack speed, but there's an opportunity to overcome that, which I'll talk about in a minute. And of course, Sergeant Hammer, when she has a pretty strong base attack, and then it gets even stronger when she's in siege mode here, and of course this splashes. Um, Sylvanas has somewhat of an maybe average or below average attack damage, but does have opportunities to do damage in other ways because she's sort of a hybrid auto attacker and mage. Um, Vala, Zul'jin, of course, have opportunities to stack their damage. Vala through Hatred, and then, of course, when she activates Vault, her next auto attack does more damage as well, based on the number of Hatred stacks she has. So this is her attack damage as it stacks with Hatred, and then this is her attack damage after using Vault as it stacks with Hatred here. For Zul'jin, his base attack damage is 94. Assuming maybe he gets like 300 stacks throughout a game, he can get up to 154. And again, this is just the base value. It will get even higher by level 20. If he activates this trait, he gets a 25% bonus, and then that's that at 300 as well. Raynor, every fourth auto attack, his Give Him Some Pepper will give a like 125% damage bonus, and it will do AoE. So that becomes one of the strongest auto attacks in the game. Greymane in Worgen form, also one of the strongest auto attackers. Phoenix, pretty weak auto attacks, but a high attack speed, which we'll get into in a minute. And this phase bomb mode is a splash as well. I forgot to mention as well, we have the repeater mode for Phoenix here, which is below average in range, and then his phase bomb mode, which is higher than average in range, and then he can get a 20 upgrade, which increases that even further, only for phase bomb though. So you can see all of the upgrades to auto attack damage here through various talents. Wizened Duelist is a huge damage boost for Greymane, but you take that at the exchange of Quicksilver Bullets. So if you need more human range, you need to evade the tanks, you can go into Quicksilver Bullets. Or if you need the more damage, you can go into Wizened Duelist. Frequent Flyer for Falstad is a huge stacking quest. Let's see. Mobile offense, which just rewards Phoenix for stutter stepping essentially. After he stutter steps and attacks a hero, it does more damage. So, and that applies to both repeater mode and phase mode. Ace in the Hole is basically a flat 12% upgrade when attacking a stunned or slowed hero for Raynor, and that stacks with Give Him Some Pepper as well. When Sergeant Hammer is in siege mode and has the advanced artillery talent, her auto attack damage goes from 168 all the way up to 224. It's pretty insane. And then if she also takes at 16 either Mechanical Know-How or Executioner, that gets bumped up to 291 damage. And of course, that will stack at level 16. And then Krita the Hunter for Vala. Is a huge damage boost to her auto attack damage, and then that stacks in different ways with if you take the Death Dealer talent and you vault, and then stacking those two things together. So she can have obviously one of the strongest auto attacks, period. Zagara, as a trade-off for having sort of a below average auto attack damage, but having higher attack range, gets various talents that can buff her damage. Envenomed Spines is a level 4 talent that applies a damage over time, I think over 4 seconds, to her next auto attack, and that makes her auto attack do a total of 313 damage. If she also has an infinite stacking quest at level 4, and then she has Jagged Barbs. I can't remember if it's 16 or 20, that increases her damage as well. All right, getting into attack speed. So one attack per second is obviously the average across the game, and then usually ranged auto attackers go above that in some capacity. A good example is Vala. She's probably one of the fastest auto attackers. Greymane, when he's got Inner Beast, is very fast. Phoenix in repeater mode, very, very fast, and that can go even higher through a number of talents. Warp Warfare at level 7 in particular makes this pretty insane. Um, Frequent Flyer for Falstad, the auto attack talent, and then if Sylvanas goes Might of the Banshee Queen, level 1 talent, she can go up to 2 as well. So let's talk about Hanzo again. So we mentioned how he has a high auto attack damage, but a very slow attack speed, the slowest attack speed of all auto attackers. Um, when he takes Redemption and completes it, he gets the flat average of one, one attack per second. And so that makes this 198 damage, actual 198 damage per second, where it's actually at a base value more like 130 damage per second or something like that. So Redemption makes him a very strong ranged auto attacker. And I think on maps like Braxis, where he can essentially stand behind the wall that blocks um, the control point and attack the tank from there, um, or even on Hanamura, um, just keeping your distance and putting out consistent damage. Redemption can be a very, very powerful level 1 talent, and I think it's underpicked. Let's see, what else? Sergeant Hammer has a base attack speed of 1, and when she goes Ultra Capacitors at level 20, that can go up to 1.6, and she's just shelling out huge damage if she went both her level 1 and 16 talents here. Very, very fast, very, very scary. Tychus has some attack speed upgrades as well. If he goes Master Assassin, he gets a baseline increase from 4 to 4.4. And when he completes it, that goes all the way up to 5. And that makes all of the damage that he does, whether that's through minigun or his base attacks, speed up and do that much more damage. So if he's got 4 auto attacks per second, and each one is doing 50 damage, then he's essentially doing 200 damage per second, and that can get even higher with Master Assassins. So pretty insane value there. And you can see how Tracer. Let's talk now about Tracer and Tassadar. So Tracer attacks 2 bullets with 8 bullets per second. So with a clip of 10, it takes her about a second, 1.25 seconds to complete the clip. And so, 8 times 20 is about 160 damage per second. And when that goes to locked and loaded, that's 240 damage per second. So pretty insane buff from locked and loaded. Tassadar, he does the challenge of Tassadar when he's ranged auto attack build is he has to stand there and be stationary, but he doesn't get the benefits of being Sergeant Hammer, who gets to have this extra range. And so it's not really recommended that you do this build. However, keep in mind that when you go the auto attack build on Tassadar, completing his level 1 quest causes his auto attacks to chain to other enemies. And so this can go from 1 to 2 times damage to even 3 times damage. And I think it's even less than that, though, because the chain is I think it's 75%. So it's somewhere within that range. And he does 4 of these per second. So when it's fully stacked, he does 120 damage per second, and then that chains to 2 enemies at, I think it's 75% value. And so if you're able to stand still and just shell out some damage, this can be really great. But generally, if that's the case, you're probably wanting to go Sergeant Hammer anyway, and Tassadar probably needs to be a W build or a Q build. What else? I think that's it for auto attacks. We can get into more later. Let's go into giant killers. So if it's just listed here, then it means every auto attack applies this through a talent. So Cassia gets a giant killer at 16, I think, through martial law, where it's on slowed or CC'd enemies. Falstad gets a giant killer at 13. It goes from 1.5% to 2% if he has Tailwind active. Other ones will say every 3 attacks or every 4 attacks, and that is those are instances like Phoenix, Raynor, um, or Vala. So Phoenix's Giant Killer only happens on every third auto attack. For Raynor, it occurs on when his Give him some pepper activates, which at a baseline is every fourth attack. If he takes the level 20 ability, then it's every third attack. And if he takes a level 16 talent, he can choose when that occurs. Or actually, this occurs. Sorry, the level 16 talent is the one that gives him the Giant Killer, and that comes in with a baseline activatable that can make his next auto attack apply that 3%. Otherwise, it's every fourth or every third, depending on your level 20 talent. Sergeant Hammer's Giant Killer, a 1.5. It's one of the weaker ones. However, it applies in Splash through Siege modes, so that can be very powerful and it has multiplicative value. Sylvanas has a weak Giant Killer as well, but that's traded off by getting it at level 1, and it applies to every auto attack on from there on out if they have 3 stacks over trait. Tychus, if he goes activates his minigun, it's a 2% Giant Killer, and obviously attacking 4 auto attacks per second, he can do 8% damage per second. And let me just look real quick. How long does minigun activates for 3 seconds? So he can do 8% times 3, 24% of someone's health through getting every single minigun auto attack, and that can change depending on if you took In the Rhythm, which can make minigun go longer, or if you take Bigger They Are, it becomes 4% per per attack, and so it's now 4% times 4 is 16 times 3 is what, 48% of someone's health if you could get every auto attack through Bigger They Are. And this also stacks with his level 16 talent, Sizzling Attacks, which adds a 1% Giant Killer to every single attack. And so if he's doing that with Minigun, it becomes a 3%. And then if he's got Bigger They Are, that becomes 5%. So Bigger They Are plus Sizzling Attacks at 16, that's 5 times 4, that's 20% over 1 second times 3 seconds equals 60% of someone's health just with the Bigger They Are at level 4 and Sizzling Attacks. Pretty insane. The remaining ones here are those who have Giant Killers, but they are restricted to spells. So Tassadar has a Q Giant Killer, I think at level 16. Tracer's got a Pulse Bomb upgrade at level 10 that can do a Giant Killer. And then Zagara has a Giant Killer on her W that you can get at level 16. So it's not as readily available as the other Giant Killers. So I hope this gives a good summary of all of the ranged auto attackers. I think it's pretty clear that Tychus and Vala in particular, and to some extent Raynor and Hammer, are some of the best Giant Killers we have, particularly because Hammer can outrange and Raynor can outrange tanks, and if Vala chooses to, she can as well through various upgrades. And then Tychus, I think, going press the advantage and either going into the Bigger They Are or In the Rhythm is a really crazy tank killing option. But beyond that, you do have these sort of classifications of different types of ranged auto attackers. You have the outrangers, the Raynors, the Hammers, the Zagaras, the Zul'jins, to some extent the Valas. You have the get up in their facers like Greymane, Cassia, Tychus, and Tracer to some extent. And then you have the sort of mid-rangers like Phoenix, Falstad, Lunara, Sylvanas, and they all can get those upgrades if they need. I think based on these stats, I think it's relevant to say that Tassadar probably should not be considered a ranged auto attacker because his ability to do that is so dependent on him being able to just stand still, and he doesn't get the range benefits of Sergeant Hammer. So, if you have any comments or questions about anything on this sheet and how it relates to drafts, I'd look forward to that conversation. So, take it easy, guys.